Commander Zektar of the Hegemony's Third Survey Fleet had seen 1,000 worlds, but none quite like the blue marbles spinning before his flagship. Earth, the natives called it. A singular name for a singular world that would prove to be the galaxy's greatest miscalculation. Initial scans complete, Commander, reported his lieutenant. 6 arms working efficiently across the control interface. Population of approximately 8 billion. Technology level classification, primitive plus. They have achieved basic spaceflight but remain confined to their immediate solar system. Perfect candidates for integration into the labor pools. Zektar nodded, his crystalline features reflecting the blue light of the planet below. The Hegemony had perfected this process over millennia. Survey, evaluate, subjugate. Species that showed promise were incorporated into their vast empire as workers, soldiers, or servants depending on their natural abilities. Those that didn't were eliminated or relocated to preserve valuable resources. What are their primary characteristics? He asked, settling back into his command throne. This was always the most interesting part. Each species brought something unique to the table, and the Hegemony had grown strong by recognizing and exploiting those strengths. Bipedal mammals, average lifespan of 70 to 80 rotations. Moderately intelligent, highly social, demonstrate basic tool use and primitive industry. They show unusual diversity and physical appearance despite belonging to a single species. Most interesting trait appears to be their adaptability. They've colonized every major landmass and climate zone on their world. Adaptability is useful, Zektar mused. The mining colonies in the Scorched Rim could use workers capable of environmental flexibility. What about their social structure? Fragmented into hundreds of tribal units they call nations. Constant low-level warfare between these groups, though they occasionally unite against common threats. Their military technology is crude but shows creative innovation. They've developed chemical propulsion rockets, basic energy weapons, and nuclear fission. Nothing that poses a threat to our forces, but more advanced than typical pre-contact civilizations. Zektar's attention sharpened. Nuclear fission was often a marker of species that might prove troublesome. Not dangerous, but potentially requiring more resources to pacify. Show me their military capabilities. The holographic display shifted, showing grainy images of human military forces. Soldiers in camouflaged uniforms carrying projectile weapons, armored vehicles that crawled on treads rather than hovering above the surface, aircraft that relied on primitive wing-based flight rather than proper gravitic manipulation. Laughable, commented the tactical officer. Our standard pacification protocols should have them surrendered within hours. A few demonstrations of our superior firepower and their leadership will negotiate terms. But Commander Zektar had survived long enough to develop instincts about these things. Something about the images troubled him. The humans in the display moved with purpose and discipline. Their weapons might be primitive, but they wielded them with competence. More importantly, their eyes held something he'd learned to recognize over the centuries. Defiance. What about their response to authority, he asked. How do they react to superior force? The lieutenant consulted his datapad. Mixed results in their historical records. Some groups surrender when faced with overwhelming odds. Others, he paused, reviewing the data. Others fight to the death regardless of the tactical situation. There are recorded instances of their warriors choosing mass suicide rather than surrender. One nation, called Japan, had a cultural tradition of ritual death before dishonor. And their capacity for violence? Extensive. They've developed remarkably efficient methods of killing each other. Their recent global conflicts involved casualty numbers in the millions. They've weaponized everything from disease to nuclear fire. But Commander, this is typical for pre-contact species. Once they understand the futility of resistance against superior technology, they adapt quickly to hegemony rule. Zektar wasn't convinced. The hegemony's expansion had proceeded smoothly for 10,000 years precisely because they were careful about which species they encountered. Most intelligent life forms were fundamentally peaceful, developing technology and civilization as natural defenses against environmental dangers. They fought when necessary but preferred cooperation and trade. These humans seemed different. Their entire planetary development appeared to be driven by conflict, not the simple territorial disputes common to emerging species, but sophisticated, organized, industrial-scale warfare. They turned violence into an art form, then a science. Recommendations? He asked his senior staff. Standard subjugation protocol, replied the tactical officer immediately. Orbit the planet, demonstrate our superior technology, demand surrender from their leadership. When they comply, we begin integration procedures. The adaptable ones go to the frontier colonies. The intelligent ones get education for technical roles. The aggressive ones become soldiers for the hegemony forces. The alternative? Zektar knew the answer but wanted to hear it spoken. Orbital bombardment until they surrender or are eliminated. Then we harvest the planet's resources without the complication of managing a native population. Commander Zektar studied the planet below for long minutes. 8 billion potential slaves, or a sterile world rich in rare metals and water. Both options had merit, but the hegemony preferred living workers when possible. Machines were expensive and required maintenance. Biological slaves were self-repairing and could reproduce to create new generations of workers. Begin standard protocols, he decided, but maintain battle readiness. Something about this species feels unpredictable. The hegemony's first contact protocols were refined through centuries of experience. A single massive ship would position itself in orbit above the most developed population centers. Broadcasting on all frequencies, they would announce their presence and demand communication with planetary leaders. The sheer size of their vessel, over 3 kilometers of advanced technology hovering in the sky, was usually sufficient to ensure cooperation. Earth's response was immediate and entirely typical. Their communication networks lit up with panicked broadcasts. Military forces went to maximum alert. Government leaders demanded emergency sessions. Scientists worked frantically to understand what they were seeing. Within hours, a coordinated response emerged. The United Nations Secretary-General, a dignified woman named Chen Wei, appeared on global broadcasts speaking directly to the alien ship. To the visitors from space, this is Earth. We welcome peaceful contact and hope to establish diplomatic relations. Please respond if your intentions are peaceful. Standard procedure called for a 24-hour delay before responding. This gave the native population time to fully grasp the reality of their situation and often prevented hasty military responses. When Commander Zektar finally replied, he used the traditional hegemony greeting that had worked on hundreds of worlds. Greetings to the inhabitants of Earth. I am Commander Zektar of the hegemony's 3rd Survey Fleet. Your world has been selected for integration into our galactic civilization. This will bring great benefits to your species, including advanced technology, medical knowledge, and protection from external threats. In return, your people will contribute their talents to the greater good of the hegemony. He paused, letting the translation software work across dozens of human languages. Your leaders have 72 hours to arrange for peaceful surrender. Resistance is futile and will only result in unnecessary casualties. Comply, and your species will find a valued place in our empire. The response came faster than expected, and it wasn't from Secretary General Chen. Hegemony vessel, this is Admiral Sarah Mitchell, Chairman of the Earth Defense Coalition. Your terms are rejected. Earth is not for sale, and humanity bows to no one. You have 72 hours to leave our solar system peacefully, or we will consider your presence an act of war. Commander Zektar blinked in surprise. In all his years of conducting first contact situations, no species had ever issued an ultimatum to the hegemony. Most begged for mercy or tried to negotiate better terms for their surrender. A few attempted futile attacks that served only to demonstrate their helplessness. None had ever told the hegemony to leave. Sir, reported the communications officer, we're detecting massive movement across their military installations. Their primitive spacecraft are launching in unprecedented numbers. Energy signatures suggest they're bringing every weapon system they possess online. Are they actually planning to fight us? Asked the tactical officer, genuine bewilderment in his voice. Zektar studied the tactical displays with growing unease. The humans weren't just posturing or buying time for evacuation. They were organizing a coordinated defense of their world using everything they had. Nuclear weapons were being prepared for launch. Their space-based assets were moving into attack formations. Most tellingly, their civilian populations weren't fleeing in panic. They were volunteering for military service. Commander, the lieutenant reported, voice tight with disbelief. Their recruitment centers are being overwhelmed by volunteers. Military-age adults, elderly veterans, even children lying about their age to enlist. Their industrial complexes are retooling for weapons production. They're acting like they actually think they can win. For the first time in his long career, Commander Zektar felt something he'd forgotten was possible. Doubt. The next 24 hours were a masterclass in human organizational capability. Despite having no experience with alien technology, Earth's military forces adapted with frightening speed. They couldn't match hegemony weapons directly, but they could think creatively about how to use what they had. Nuclear weapons were fitted with improvised guidance systems designed to overcome alien point defense. Kinetic kill vehicles were launched on ballistic trajectories that would be difficult to predict. Most surprisingly, They began modifying their space infrastructure into weapons platforms. "Sir, they're using their industrial stations as missile bases," reported the tactical officer. "They've evacuated the civilian workers and loaded them with explosives. If we engage, they'll ram our ships with them." "Casualties mean nothing to them," added the intelligence analyst. "Their historical records show they're willing to accept massive losses to achieve strategic objectives. During their Second Global War, one nation absorbed 27 million casualties and continued fighting." Commander Zektar realized they had encountered something unprecedented. Not just a species willing to fight despite impossible odds, but one that had built their entire civilization around the concept of warfare. Every human was potentially a soldier. Every building could become a fortress. Every piece of technology could be weaponized. The hegemony had the superior technology, but humans had something else entirely. They had the will to turn their entire world into a weapon, rather than surrender. As the 72-hour deadline approached, both sides prepared for a battle that would change the galaxy forever. The hegemony brought the weight of 10,000 years of military dominance. Humanity brought something the galaxy had never seen before: the absolute refusal to kneel. When the first shots were fired, the universe learned a lesson that would echo across the stars. Technology could be overcome. Numbers could be matched. Resources could be replaced. But a species that would rather die fighting than live in chains was something altogether different. Commander Zektar's last transmission to Hegemony Command was brief and chilling. "They're not like the others. Send everything we have or lose everything we are." The galaxy was about to discover that some species should never be provoked, some worlds should never be touched, and some enemies should never be made. Earth was all three. The first battle for Earth lasted 18 brutal hours and shattered every assumption the hegemony held about primitive warfare. What should have been a simple demonstration of superior firepower became a nightmare that would haunt alien military academies for generations to come. Admiral Sarah Mitchell stood in the underground command center beneath Cheyenne Mountain, watching tactical displays that told an impossible story. The massive alien vessel hanging over Geneva should have been untouchable to Earth's primitive weapons. Should have been. "Confirm that hit," she ordered, hardly daring to believe the readings. "Confirmed, Admiral." The Buenos Aires strike package penetrated their shield grid. Minimal damage to the alien vessel, but their shields are down 30% in that section. Colonel Harrison's voice carried a mixture of triumph and disbelief. How the hell did a bunch of modified mining charges accomplish that? The answer lay in humanity's greatest strength: the ability to think outside established parameters. When conventional weapons failed against hegemony shields, human engineers had improvised. Mining explosives designed to fracture asteroid rock were loaded into ramshackle spacecraft and programmed for kamikaze runs. Not elegant, not sophisticated, but effective enough to prove that the aliens weren't invulnerable. "Their energy signatures are fluctuating," reported the sensor operator. "Looks like they're having to divert power to maintain shield integrity. Whatever we hit, we hurt them." Admiral Mitchell nodded grimly. Earth's first strikes had been purely experimental, probing attacks designed to test alien defenses and gather intelligence. The real battle was about to begin, and humanity's survival depended on lessons learned in these opening exchanges. Above them, Commander Zektar was learning his own harsh lessons about human warfare. The species' willingness to sacrifice their own vessels in ramming attacks was disturbing enough, but their tactical thinking was proving genuinely dangerous. They weren't trying to match hegemony technology directly. Instead, they were exploiting weaknesses in alien doctrine that hadn't been tested in centuries. "Damage report," he commanded, studying the tactical display with new respect for his opponents. "Minor structural damage to the lower hull sections. Shield generators are operating at reduced capacity but within acceptable parameters. However, Commander, their attack pattern suggests sophisticated understanding of our defensive systems. They've identified our shield refresh cycles and point defense blind spots with remarkable accuracy." That was the truly troubling development. In less than a day of combat, human forces had analyzed hegemony technology well enough to find exploitable weaknesses. Most species required months or years to develop such tactical insights if they ever managed it at all. "How are they learning so quickly?" Zektar asked. "Unknown, sir. Their information processing capability exceeds predicted parameters. They appear to be sharing combat data across their entire military network in real time. Every engagement, successful or failed, is being analyzed by their entire force structure simultaneously. It was like fighting a single massive organism rather than a traditional military force. Each human unit acted with knowledge gained from every other unit's experience. Their learning curve wasn't linear, it was exponential. Sir, incoming transmission from the surface. Priority Alpha. Admiral Mitchell's face appeared on the command screen, her expression hard as steel. Commander Zekthar, this is your final warning. Withdraw from Earth space immediately, or face the consequences. You've seen what we're capable of with improvised weapons. You don't want to see what we can accomplish with proper preparation. The alien commander almost laughed at the humans' audacity. One minor shield fluctuation and they were making threats? Admiral Mitchell, you have inflicted negligible damage against a single survey vessel. The hegemony fleet numbers in the thousands. Your resistance is admirable but futile. Then you don't understand humans very well, Mitchell replied. We've been fighting wars on this planet for 10,000 years. Against each other, against our environment, against impossible odds. The one lesson we've learned better than any other is this. When someone tries to take your home, you make them pay in blood for every inch. The transmission ended, leaving Zektar staring at a blank screen. There was something in the human's tone that suggested knowledge he didn't possess, as if they were holding cards he couldn't see. He was about to find out exactly what those cards were. Earth's response to the failed negotiations was swift and coordinated across every continent. For the first time in human history, the entire species was united against a common enemy. Ancient rivalries were set aside, resources were pooled, and every human institution was transformed into an instrument of war. The industrial mobilization was staggering in its scope and speed. Automobile factories retooled to produce missile components. Computer manufacturing plants shifted to guidance systems. Mining operations focused on rare earth elements needed for advanced electronics. Even entertainment companies were recruited, using their special effects expertise to create decoy installations that would confuse alien senses. But the most significant development was happening in research facilities around the world, where human scientists were performing miracles of reverse engineering. The debris from the first engagement had provided samples of hegemony technology, and Earth's brightest minds were dissecting it with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Dr. Elizabeth Warren led the primary analysis team at MIT, working with alien materials that should have been beyond human comprehension. The breakthrough came when she realized the extraterrestrial technology operated on principles that humans had theorized but never implemented. It's not magic, she explained to the assembled team of international scientists. Their shields work by creating localized gravitational distortions. Their weapons are directed energy systems operating in wavelengths we haven't fully explored. Their propulsion uses controlled spatial compression. All of this is within our theoretical framework. We just lack the engineering capability to reproduce it. Yet, added Dr. Paul Chen from Beijing. But we don't need to reproduce it perfectly. We just need to understand it well enough to defeat it. The human approach to alien technology was characteristic of their species. Where other civilizations might spend decades slowly understanding and adapting new concepts, humans immediately looked for ways to weaponize what they learned. Within 72 hours of first contact, Earth's research teams had identified 17 potential vulnerabilities in hegemony systems. More importantly, they were sharing this information freely with military commanders who possessed an intuitive understanding of how to exploit technological advantages in combat situations. Commander Zektar received reports of human activity with growing unease. Intelligence suggested massive industrial mobilization, but the specific details were troubling. Instead of building defensive installations, the humans appeared to be preparing for offensive operations. Sir, we're detecting unusual energy signatures from multiple locations across the planet. The humans are constructing something, but our sensors can't penetrate their camouflage efforts. Camouflage? Zektar was intrigued, despite himself. Show me. The tactical display revealed dozens of sites where human activity was intense but incomprehensible. Heat signatures suggested massive energy expenditure, but visual observation showed only empty terrain or obviously false structures. The humans were hiding something significant, and they were doing it with remarkable sophistication. They've learned to mask their operations against our sensors, the intelligence officer reported. This represents an impossible rate of technological advancement. Species don't typically develop countermeasures to alien technology within days of first contact, unless they're not a typical species, Zektar murmured. Every hour of interaction with these humans revealed new capabilities that challenged hegemony assumptions about technological development. They were adapting not just quickly but creatively, finding solutions that hegemony doctrine had never anticipated. The next phase of the battle began at dawn on the third day, when Earth launched its first coordinated counterattack. Instead of the desperate improvised strikes of the initial engagement, this was a carefully orchestrated assault designed to exploit everything humans had learned about alien technology. The attack came from 17 different vectors simultaneously. Modified intercontinental ballistic missiles rose from hidden launchers, their nuclear warheads replaced with experimental weapons designed specifically to disrupt hegemony shield systems. Orbital platforms that had been disguised as debris suddenly activated, revealing themselves to be kinetic bombardment systems aimed at the alien vessel. Most surprisingly, a coordinated electromagnetic pulse was generated by power grids across 3 continents, creating an interference field that blinded alien sensors for critical seconds. But the real surprise was the message transmitted on all frequencies just as the attack began. Admiral Mitchell's voice reached not just Commander Zektar, but the entire hegemony fleet, through communication channels that should have been impossible for humans to access. To the hegemony forces currently en route to our solar system, this is Admiral Sarah Mitchell of the Earth Defense Coalition. Your survey ship is about to learn why humanity has survived every existential threat we've ever faced. We don't just fight to win, we fight to make sure our enemies never threaten anyone again. Zektar barely had time to process the implications of that transmission before his ship came under the most sophisticated assault he'd ever experienced. The humans weren't just throwing weapons at his vessel. They were using their understanding of hegemony technology to create focused attacks against specific vulnerabilities. Shield generators overloaded as resonance weapons found their exact frequency signatures. Point defense systems were overwhelmed by coordinated salvos that arrived from perfectly calculated angles. Most disturbing, the humans had somehow developed the ability to disrupt hegemony communication networks, isolating his ship from the approaching fleet. "Damage report," he demanded, as his command deck shook under impacts that shouldn't have been possible. "Shield collapse imminent. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Engineering reports cascade failures across all primary systems." The tactical officer's voice carried a note of panic that Zektar had never heard from hegemony personnel. Through the chaos of battle, one fact became clear. The humans had accomplished in 3 days what most species required years to achieve. They had developed weapons capable of threatening hegemony vessels, tactics sophisticated enough to exploit alien weaknesses, and the organizational capability to coordinate global military operations against superior technology. But the most terrifying realization came when Zektar accessed his ship's learning databases and understood what the humans had truly accomplished. They hadn't just reverse-engineered alien technology, they had improved upon it. Their weapons were more efficient, their tactics more creative, their strategic thinking more flexible than anything in hegemony doctrine. The survey ship's final transmission to hegemony command was a single word that would reshape galactic politics forever: retreat. But it was already too late. The humans had accessed hegemony communication networks, and Earth's message was being broadcast across the galaxy on frequencies that every spacefaring species monitored. Admiral Mitchell's words reached 1,000 civilizations simultaneously, and the content was as revolutionary as the method of delivery. "To all beings who value freedom, this is Earth. The hegemony has been repelled from our world, but they will return with greater force. When they do, remember this. No species is too primitive to resist tyranny, no technology is too advanced to overcome, and no empire is too powerful to defeat. Humanity stands ready to aid any world that chooses freedom over slavery. The galaxy doesn't have to kneel to anyone." Commander Zektar's flagship limped away from Earth with 40% casualties, and the knowledge that everything the hegemony believed about galactic supremacy had been shattered by a species that had never left their own solar system. Behind them, Earth prepared for the real war that was coming. Because humans understood something about conflict that the galaxy was about to learn, the first battle was never about winning. It was about making sure your enemy understood exactly what they were choosing to fight. High Admiral Vex Noth of the hegemony's Grand Fleet had conquered 47 star systems without losing a single vessel. His reputation stretched across the galaxy as the architect of hegemony expansion, the strategist who had broken the resistance of the Crystal Confederacy and brought the gas giant collective to heel. In 10,000 years of galactic dominance, no species had ever humiliated hegemony forces the way these primitive humans had humiliated Commander Zektar. That humiliation would not stand. Status report on the Earth situation. He commanded from the bridge of his flagship, Eternal Dominion. The massive vessel stretched for 8 kilometers, bristling with weapons that could sterilize planets, and shields that could withstand stellar bombardment. Around it, the Grand Fleet assembled in numbers not seen since the Void War. 300 warships, each capable of laying waste to civilizations. Human resistance exceeded all predictions, reported Fleet Intelligence Coordinator Thexnar, his mandibles clicking with nervous energy. They demonstrated technological adaptation capabilities that violate established developmental models. Most concerning, their initial victory has inspired resistance movements across 17 subjugated systems. That last point was what truly concerned High Admiral Vexnoth. The hegemony's power rested not just on superior technology, but on the absolute certainty of their invincibility. For 10 millennia, no species had successfully resisted hegemony conquest. The mere presence of their ships was usually sufficient to ensure compliance. Now, across the galaxy, enslaved populations were asking a dangerous question. If primitive humans could defeat hegemony forces, why couldn't they? What specific capabilities did they demonstrate? Vexnoth asked. Technological reverse engineering at impossible speeds. Strategic coordination across their entire species. Most problematically, they displayed innovative thinking that exceeded hegemony tactical models. They didn't fight the way our simulations predicted any species would fight. The High Admiral studied the tactical recordings from Earth with professional interest. The human attacks showed creativity and flexibility that was genuinely impressive. More troubling, they had identified weaknesses in hegemony systems that his own engineers hadn't recognized. It was like watching a completely different approach to warfare, one based on adaptation rather than overwhelming force. Recommendations? Complete orbital bombardment, replied the tactical coordinator immediately. Sterilize the planet from a safe distance. Eliminate the threat and demonstrate to the galaxy that resistance equals extinction. Vexnoth considered the proposal carefully. It had merit. Nothing sent a message like the total destruction of a rebellious world, but something about the human response troubled him. They had broadcast their victory across the galaxy using hegemony communication networks, a feat that should have been impossible. That suggested capabilities beyond what initial surveys had revealed. What about their broadcast to other systems? How did they access our networks? Unknown. Our communication security is theoretically impenetrable to pre-contact species. Either they possess hidden technological capabilities, or they've achieved breakthrough understanding of our systems through methods we don't comprehend. The uncertainty was what decided Vexnoth against simple orbital bombardment. If the humans possessed unknown capabilities, destroying them from orbit might eliminate a potential threat, or it might miss technologies that could be adapted by other resistance movements. Better to crush them completely, publicly, in a way that demonstrated absolute hegemony superiority. We proceed with full invasion protocols. Land forces establish complete control, interrogate their leadership about their technological breakthroughs, then execute them publicly. The galaxy needs to see humans defeated face-to-face, not simply vaporized from orbit. It was a decision that would cost the hegemony more than High Admiral Vexnoth could possibly imagine. On Earth, humanity prepared for the return of alien forces with methodical efficiency that would have impressed any military historian. The first engagement had provided invaluable intelligence about hegemony capabilities, and every lesson learned was being applied to defensive preparations across the planet. General Marcus Webb commanded the Unified Earth Defense Force from a command center buried 3 kilometers beneath the Swiss Alps. Around him, displays showed a planet transforming itself into the galaxy's most dangerous fortress. The industrial mobilization that had begun during the first contact was now operating at levels that strained the definition of possibility. Status on the orbital defense platforms, he asked. 67% complete, reported Colonel Sarah Kim. We're installing the new shield disruptor arrays based on alien technology analysis, Doctor. Warren's team thinks they can generate localized electromagnetic fields that will interfere with hegemony shield harmonics. Ground-based fortifications? Every major city now has underground bunker networks connected by high-speed transit tubes. We can move troops and supplies anywhere on the planet within hours while remaining completely invisible to orbital sensors. The decoy installations are ready to activate. They'll show false heat signatures and energy readings, designed to draw alien fire away from actual military targets. General Webb nodded approvingly. The human approach to defensive warfare was characteristically thorough. They weren't just preparing to resist invasion. They were creating a planetary environment where every square kilometer could become a battlefield, where every citizen could become a combatant, and where every structure could hide weapons designed to kill aliens. But the most significant development was taking place in research facilities, where human scientists were performing miracles of innovation. The debris and sensor readings from the first battle had provided enough information for breakthrough discoveries that were reshaping Earth's technological capabilities. Dr. Barr, Elizabeth Warren stood before a prototype weapon that represented the culmination of human engineering brilliance. The device looked innocuous enough, a metallic cylinder about the size of a baseball bat, but the principles underlying its operation were revolutionary. "We call it a reality anchor," she explained to the assembled military commanders. "Hegemony technology relies on manipulating local space-time to achieve effects we can't replicate. Their shields, their weapons, their propulsion, all of it depends on controlled distortions of physical laws. This device creates a field where those distortions can't form." General Webb leaned forward, immediately grasping the implications. "You're saying it can shut down their technology?" "Not shut down, revert to normal physics. Their energy weapons become simple light beams. Their shields collapse to normal matter. Their ships become subject to conventional laws of motion and momentum. Inside the reality anchor's field of effect, they're just as vulnerable as we are." "What's the range?" "Currently about 50 meters per device. But we can network them to create larger effect zones, and we're working on scaled-up versions that could cover entire city blocks. The real beauty is that they're completely passive. No energy signature, no moving parts, nothing for alien sensors to detect until it's too late." The weapon represented everything that made humans dangerous to the established galactic order. Faced with superior technology, they didn't try to match it directly. Instead, they found ways to neutralize it entirely, turning technological advantages into liabilities. When the Hegemony's Grand Fleet arrived at Earth 6 weeks after the first encounter, they found a world that had transformed itself beyond recognition. High Admiral Vexnoth's sensors detected massive energy signatures across the planet, but the specific sources remained mysteriously hidden. Heat blooms suggested industrial activity on a scale that should have been impossible for a pre-contact civilization, but visual observation showed only empty terrain and obvious decoys. "Analysis?" he requested. "Extensive preparations for ground warfare," reported the intelligence coordinator. "They've learned to mask their true capabilities, but energy expenditure indicates weapons manufacturing, fortification construction, and military coordination on a planetary scale. Most concerning, we're detecting gravitational anomalies that suggest they've developed primitive space-time manipulation technology." "In 6 weeks?" Vexnoth's voice carried disbelief. "That represents technological advancement that should require centuries. The evidence is unmistakable. Either they possessed hidden capabilities before first contact, or they've achieved unprecedented rates of innovation. Their learning curve appears to be exponential rather than linear." The High Admiral studied Earth with new respect for its defenders. The planet below represented something the Hegemony had never encountered, a species capable of matching their technological advancement through pure innovative thinking. It was like fighting an enemy that could evolve new capabilities in real time. "Begin invasion procedures, but maintain maximum caution. These humans have proven they can surprise us." The second battle for Earth began at dawn on a Tuesday, when the Hegemony's Grand Fleet moved into assault position above the planet's major population centers. Instead of the single survey vessel that had attacked before, Earth now faced 300 warships backed by the full might of galactic civilization's most powerful military force. The Hegemony's opening bombardment was designed to break human resistance before ground forces landed. Energy weapons that could crack continental plates opened fire on major cities, while kinetic bombardment systems launched projectiles that should have created crater lakes where urban centers had stood. The results were not what High Admiral Vexnoth expected. Instead of the anticipated destruction, his weapons encountered defensive systems that violated everything the Hegemony understood about primitive warfare. Energy beams designed to penetrate planetary crust were absorbed by field generators that shouldn't have existed. Kinetic projectiles traveling at significant fractions of light speed were deflected by gravitational distortions that defied explanation. Most disturbing, Earth's counterattack began before the Hegemony bombardment had ended. Weapons platforms hidden across the planet opened fire with systems that perfectly mimicked Hegemony technology, but operated with impossible efficiency. Shield disruptor arrays created localized dead zones where alien defenses simply ceased to function. Most shocking, human forces demonstrated the ability to predict Hegemony tactics with uncanny accuracy, as if they possessed detailed intelligence about alien military doctrine. The space battle that followed would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come, not because of its scale. The Hegemony had fought larger engagements, but because it marked the first time in 10,000 years that a pre-contact species had achieved tactical parity with galactic military forces. Human weapons were crude by alien standards, but they were perfectly designed to exploit specific vulnerabilities in hegemony systems. Earth's defensive networks operated with coordination that suggested artificial intelligence guidance, but sensor readings showed no evidence of computer control. Instead, the planet appeared to be functioning as a single massive organism, with every defensive system sharing information and resources in real time. High Admiral Vexnoth watched his fleet suffer casualties that should have been impossible. Human weapons were destroying hegemony vessels through methods that his tactical computers couldn't analyze. More troubling, the enemy was learning from every exchange, adapting their strategies faster than hegemony forces could adjust their own approaches. "Sir, the humans are targeting our command vessels specifically," reported the tactical coordinator. "They're demonstrating detailed knowledge of our fleet organization and command protocols. This suggests intelligence gathering capabilities we didn't detect. How many ships have we lost?" 14 destroyed, 47 severely damaged. Human losses appear minimal. We're detecting widespread damage to surface installations, but their orbital defenses remain largely intact. Vexnoth stared at the tactical display in growing disbelief. The Grand Fleet was taking casualties against a species that had never fought a space battle before 6 weeks ago. It was like watching the fundamental laws of warfare rewrite themselves in real time. The truth was worse than he could have imagined. Earth wasn't just defending itself, it was winning. As the battle entered its second day, reports reached the hegemony flagship that would change galactic politics forever. Human broadcast signals were reaching across the galaxy, carrying real-time footage of hegemony ships being destroyed by primitive weapons. The psychological impact was devastating to alien morale and inspirational to enslaved populations everywhere. More immediately threatening, Earth's defensive success was being broadcast with technical details that other species could understand and adapt. Humanity wasn't just fighting for their own freedom. They were teaching the galaxy how to resist hegemony domination. High Admiral Vexnoth faced a choice that would define his legacy and potentially determine the future of galactic civilization. He could escalate to total orbital bombardment, accepting massive fleet casualties to destroy Earth completely. Or he could acknowledge what the tactical situation was telling him. The hegemony had encountered something unprecedented, a species that could not only resist galactic military forces, but actively threaten them through methods that challenged every assumption about technological warfare. His decision would determine whether the galaxy continued to kneel before hegemony power or whether humanity's example would inspire a revolution that would reshape the cosmos forever. The ancient empire was about to learn that some species don't just fight for survival. They fight to ensure that tyranny becomes extinct. The moment that changed galactic history occurred on the third day of the Second Battle for Earth, when High Admiral Vexnoth made a decision that revealed the true nature of humanity's threat to the established order. Faced with mounting casualties and the growing impossibility of achieving victory through conventional means, he authorized the use of stellar bombardment weapons, devices capable of cracking planets apart at the molecular level. The order came at 1447 Earth Standard Time. All vessels, prepare planetary sterilization protocols. Target the planet's core. We end this now. What happened next would be remembered across the galaxy as the moment humanity revealed its true face to the cosmos. Deep beneath Earth's surface, Admiral Sarah Mitchell received real-time intelligence about the hegemony's escalation through captured alien communication networks. The tactical situation was clear. The enemy was preparing to destroy Earth completely rather than accept the humiliation of military defeat. Humanity's response was immediate and absolute. All stations, this is Admiral Mitchell. Execute Protocol Omega. Authorization code, never again. Across Earth, hidden installations that had been concealed from alien sensors suddenly activated. The planet's true defensive capabilities were finally revealed, and the galaxy learned why humans had been so confident in their ability to resist superior technology. Earth wasn't just defended, it was armed with weapons that redefined the concept of planetary warfare. The first indication that something unprecedented was happening came when hegemony sensors detected massive energy buildups at 17 locations across Earth's surface. The signatures were unlike anything in alien databases, suggesting power generation capabilities that exceeded the output of small stars. "Report," demanded High Admiral Vexnoth, studying readings that challenged his understanding of physics. "Unknown energy sources have activated across the planet," his sensor operator replied, voice tight with disbelief. "Power generation is reading at levels that should be impossible for any civilization below Type 2 on the Kardashev scale. Sir, they're channeling energy equivalent to the output of our entire fleet." Before Vexnoth could respond, Earth's true weapons revealed themselves. 17 beams of coherent energy launched from the planet's surface, each one carrying more destructive force than anything in hegemony arsenals. The beams weren't aimed at individual ships. They were targeted at the mathematical points in space, where hegemony vessels would be located based on their current trajectories and acceleration patterns. The aliens had milliseconds to comprehend what was happening before the weapons struck. Hegemony shields, designed to withstand stellar bombardment, simply ceased to exist as the human weapons touched them. Advanced alien armor that could resist nuclear fire melted like ice in sunlight. Entire warships, vessels that had conquered star systems, were reduced to expanding clouds of plasma in the time it took their crews to register the attack. In 17 seconds, the Grand Fleet lost 93 vessels. But the tactical destruction wasn't the most terrifying aspect of Earth's response. What truly shattered hegemony confidence was the message that accompanied the attack, broadcast across the galaxy on every communication frequency simultaneously. To all beings who have suffered under hegemony rule, this is Admiral Sarah Mitchell of Earth. You have just witnessed the destruction of 93 warships belonging to forces that came to enslave our world. These vessels represented 10,000 years of technological development and galactic military supremacy. The transmission continued as Earth's weapons recharged for another salvo. Today you see that supremacy is an illusion. Every empire can be resisted. Every tyrant can be defeated. Every chain can be broken. Humanity extends this offer to every enslaved world. We will share our technologies freely with any species that chooses freedom over servitude. High Admiral Vexnoth stared at displays showing the evaporation of 1/3 of his fleet, his mind struggling to process the implications of what he'd witnessed. The humans hadn't just defended themselves. They had demonstrated weapons capabilities that challenged hegemony technological superiority across all categories. Analysis of their weapon systems, he demanded. Impossible to analyze, replied the science officer. Energy output suggests they're tapping power sources we can't identify. Targeting accuracy indicates computational capabilities that exceed our own systems. Most concerning, they appear to have developed these technologies in the 6 weeks since our initial contact. The truth was even more disturbing than the hegemony could have imagined. Human weapons weren't based on alien technology at all. They represented a completely different approach to physics, one that achieved impossible results through methods that challenged fundamental assumptions about reality itself. Elizabeth Warren monitored the weapons discharge from her laboratory beneath MIT, watching energy readings that validated months of theoretical work. The devices Earth had just used weren't weapons in any conventional sense. They were reality manipulation systems that achieved destructive effects by convincing the universe that certain physical laws didn't apply in specific locations. Status on the quantum resonance arrays? She asked her team. All 17 arrays functioning within optimal parameters, reported Dr. Chen. Power draw is stabilizing at projected levels. We can maintain this output indefinitely. Target acquisition systems? Locked onto the remaining alien vessels. We're predicting their movement patterns 6 seconds in advance with 97% accuracy. Their tactical computers operate on deterministic algorithms that our systems can anticipate. The human approach to warfare was proving as devastating as their weapons. Instead of matching alien technology directly, they had developed systems that predicted and countered enemy actions through pure analytical superiority. It was like playing chess against opponents who could see their moves before they made them. High Admiral Vexnoth faced a tactical situation that violated every principle of galactic warfare. His remaining fleet was outnumbered, outgunned, and tactically outmatched by a species that had never left their own solar system. Worse, every moment he remained in Earth space gave the humans additional opportunities to demonstrate their capabilities to the watching galaxy. Sir, we're receiving priority transmissions from Hegemony Command, reported the communications officer. The fleet movements are being detected across 17 subjugated systems. The enslaved populations are beginning active resistance. That was the development Vexnoth had feared most. Earth's victory wasn't just military, it was inspirational. Across the galaxy, species that had accepted hegemony rule for millennia were suddenly asking themselves whether submission was truly necessary. Orders from Central Command? Withdraw immediately. Hegemony Council is implementing Emergency Protocol 7. All fleets are being recalled to protect core systems. Emergency Protocol 7 hadn't been activated in over 3,000 years. It was the hegemony's response to existential threats to their continued dominance. A complete strategic withdrawal to defensible positions while they reassessed galactic power structures. The humans had accomplished something unprecedented. They had forced the galaxy's dominant power into defensive posture through the sheer audacity of their resistance. But Earth wasn't finished demonstrating the depths of human strategic thinking. As the remnants of the Grand Fleet prepared to withdraw, Admiral Mitchell opened communications with High Admiral Vexnoth directly. The alien commander found himself face-to-face with a human whose expression carried the absolute confidence of victory. "Hi, Admiral. This is Admiral Mitchell. Before you leave our system, I want to make sure you understand exactly what just happened here." Vexnoth remained silent, his pride wounded but his tactical sense intact enough to recognize when an enemy held overwhelming advantage. "Your empire has ruled for 10,000 years because you convinced the galaxy that resistance was impossible," Mitchell continued. "Today, we've proven that assumption wrong. But destroying your ships isn't our real victory. Our real victory is this." The transmission shifted to display real-time footage from across the galaxy. On dozens of worlds, enslaved populations were rising in coordinated rebellion. Hegemony installations were under attack. Alien administrators were fleeing their posts. Most significantly, the resistance movements were using tactics and technologies clearly derived from Earth's broadcasts. "Humanity doesn't just fight for ourselves," Admiral Mitchell explained. "We fight for the principle that no being should kneel to another. Your empire ends today, not because we destroyed your ships, but because we've given every enslaved world the tools and inspiration to destroy the chains you placed on them." High Admiral Vexnoth realized he was witnessing the end of an age. The hegemony's power had rested on the certainty of their invincibility. That certainty was now shattered beyond repair, and the psychological foundation of their empire was crumbling across 1,000 star systems. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice carrying the weight of inevitable defeat. "Nothing from you," Mitchell replied, "but I'll give you some advice. The galaxy is about to become a very dangerous place for tyrants. Your choice is simple. Evolve or become extinct. Adapt to a universe where freedom matters more than force, or watch your empire burn." The transmission ended, leaving Vexnoth alone with the knowledge that he had just participated in the most catastrophic military defeat in galactic history. Not because of the ships lost, fleets could be rebuilt, but because Earth had weaponized the most dangerous force in the universe, the idea that resistance was possible. As the surviving hegemony vessels fled Earth space, they carried more than news of military defeat. They carried the knowledge that the galaxy had fundamentally changed. The age of unchallenged empire was over, replaced by something new and unprecedented. An age where humanity had become the teacher, and freedom was the lesson being learned across 1,000 worlds. Behind them, Earth began preparing for the next phase of human expansion into galactic affairs. Because Admiral Mitchell and her species understood something about warfare that the aliens were only beginning to grasp. The battle for Earth hadn't been about defending one world. It had been about liberating the entire galaxy. And humanity was just getting started. 6 months after the Battle of Earth, the galaxy was unrecognizable. The hegemony's 10,000-year reign had collapsed not through gradual decline, but through catastrophic systemic failure that left ancient power structures in ruins across hundreds of star systems. In the vacuum left by imperial authority, something unprecedented was emerging. A galactic civilization based on voluntary cooperation rather than enforced submission. Admiral Sarah Mitchell stood on the observation deck of humanity's first interstellar vessel, watching the construction of New Geneva Station in orbit around Proxima Centauri. The massive installation was humanity's first permanent foothold beyond Earth's solar system, and its purpose was both practical and symbolic. This was where the new galactic order would be born. "Status report on the liberation fleets," she requested from Captain Torres, her aide-de-camp for interstellar operations. 17 star systems have requested direct assistance against hegemony holdout forces, Torres reported. The Andromedan Collective formally declared independence yesterday. The Crystal Confederacy has reconstituted their original government and is offering mutual defense treaties. Most significantly, the former slave worlds of the Tau Ceti system have successfully repelled hegemony reconquest attempts using our technological support. Each successful liberation reinforced humanity's growing reputation as the galaxy's liberators. But Admiral Mitchell understood that military victory was only the beginning of the challenge they faced. Building a sustainable galactic civilization required more than winning battles. It required creating systems of governance and cooperation that could survive the complexities of interstellar politics. What about the hegemony core systems?
Intelligence suggests complete governmental collapse.
Central Command has lost contact with 60% of their former territories. Remaining hegemony forces are concentrated around their homeworld, but they're facing internal rebellions even there. Their emperor hasn't been seen in public for 3 months. The speed of the hegemony's disintegration had surprised even human strategic planners. Imperial power structures that had seemed unshakable had proven to be brittle when their fundamental assumptions were challenged. Fear of resistance had been replaced by the reality of effective opposition, and the psychological foundation of galactic tyranny had crumbled with shocking rapidity. But humanity's real achievement wasn't the destruction of the old order, it was the active creation of something better. The Proxima Accords, negotiated in the shadow of Earth's orbital weapons platforms, established the framework for what scholars would later call the Galactic Cooperative. Instead of imperial dominance, the new system was based on voluntary membership and mutual benefit. Species contributed what they could and received what they needed, with decisions made through consensus rather than force. Dr. Pat Panic, Elizabeth Warren, now serving as humanity's Chief Technology Officer for Interstellar Affairs, monitored the implementation of technological sharing protocols from her laboratory on New Geneva Station. The sight of alien scientists working alongside human researchers would have seemed impossible just months before, but the results spoke for themselves. Progress on the Joint Propulsion Project? She asked Dr. Zethnan, her Andromedan counterpart who had once designed weapons for the hegemony. Remarkable, the multi-limbed alien replied, his translator rendering his enthusiasm perfectly. Human intuitive engineering combined with our mathematical precision has produced a drive system 30% more efficient than anything in hegemony databases. We should achieve faster-than-light travel within 6 months, and the defensive systems integration, even more promising. Your reality anchor technology integrated with our gravitational manipulation creates defensive fields that are essentially impenetrable to energy weapons. Any species implementing these systems becomes effectively immune to hegemony-style military conquest. That was the true genius of humanity's approach to galactic liberation. Instead of simply defeating the hegemony militarily, they were making imperial conquest economically and tactically impossible. Free societies equipped with human-developed defensive technologies were simply too expensive to subjugate, too dangerous to attack, and too valuable as allies to alienate. The transformation wasn't limited to technology. Human concepts of individual rights, democratic governance, and economic cooperation were spreading across liberated worlds like a virus of freedom. Species that had known only imperial hierarchy for millennia were discovering the power of voluntary association and mutual respect. Captain Jessica Park commanded the Liberation Fleet operating in the former hegemony frontier sectors, where isolated colonies and resource extraction facilities were being converted into self-governing communities. Her ship, the human destroyer Freedom's Price, represented the new paradigm of galactic military force, powerful enough to protect the innocent, but dedicated to liberating rather than conquering. Sir, we're receiving a distress call from the mining colony in the Epsilon Eridani system, reported her communications officer. Hegemony forces are attempting to retake the installation. Local defense forces are requesting immediate assistance. Captain Park nodded grimly. Despite their overall collapse, hegemony remnants continued to pose threats to newly liberated worlds. These rearguard actions served no strategic purpose. The Empire was finished, but they represented the dying thrashers of a power structure that refused to accept its own obsolescence. Set course for Epsilon Eridani. Signal the colony that help is en route, and transmit the liberation codes to any hegemony vessels we encounter. The liberation codes were perhaps humanity's most revolutionary contribution to galactic warfare. Instead of simply destroying enemy forces, Earth's military broadcasted detailed instructions for military personnel to abandon their posts, surrender their weapons, and request asylum with cooperative forces. The messages included detailed accounts of hegemony war crimes, evidence of imperial corruption, and promises of amnesty for soldiers who chose conscience over loyalty. The psychological warfare was devastatingly effective. Hegemony military units were suffering desertion rates exceeding 50%, as individual soldiers made the rational choice between serving a collapsing empire and joining a galactic movement that offered freedom and dignity. When the Freedom's Price arrived at Epsilon Eridani, Captain Park found a situation that perfectly illustrated the new dynamics of galactic conflict. The mining colony's defense forces, a mixture of humans, liberated Andromedans and former hegemony slaves, were holding defensive positions around the installation, while 3 hegemony vessels maintained a blockade from orbit. The engagement that followed lasted exactly 17 minutes. Human weapons systems, now integrated with alien technology and tactical doctrine, achieved target locks on the hegemony vessels before entering their sensor range. The liberation codes were transmitted continuously throughout the approach, offering the enemy crews detailed instructions for surrender and asylum. When combat began, the reality anchor arrays installed on Captain Park's vessel created zones where hegemony weapons simply couldn't function, while human-designed energy weapons carved through alien defenses like they were made of paper. But the real victory came when two of the three hegemony vessels transmitted surrender codes before their shields collapsed. Crews that had served the Empire for decades chose freedom over a futile last stand, adding their knowledge and skills to the growing cooperative fleet. Casualties? Captain Park asked as the engagement concluded. None among cooperative forces. Light damage to one hegemony vessel that chose to resist. The other two crews are requesting transport to the nearest cooperative processing center for asylum review. It was becoming a typical pattern. Hegemony forces faced with human military capabilities and liberation propaganda increasingly chose defection over destruction. The Empire wasn't just losing territory, it was bleeding personnel, knowledge, and legitimacy with every engagement. 6 months after Earth's victory, Admiral Mitchell received a transmission that marked the official end of the Galactic War. High Admiral Vexnoth, speaking from the bridge of a ship flying cooperative colors rather than hegemony insignia, formally requested asylum and offered to provide complete intelligence about remaining Imperial holdouts. Admiral Mitchell, this is former High Admiral Vexnoth of the cooperative vessel New Dawn. I formally request permission to approach Earth space under flag of truce. The image on the communication screen showed an alien commander who looked decades older than the proud military leader who had once threatened Earth with annihilation. The weight of witnessing his empire's collapse had clearly taken its toll, but there was something else in his bearing. A sense of relief that suggested freedom from burdens he had carried for too long. Permission granted, former High Admiral. You'll be met by escort vessels and transported to Geneva for formal proceedings. 3 days later, the alien who had once commanded the most powerful fleet in galactic history stood before humanity's leadership in a simple conference room, offering intelligence that would ensure the complete elimination of hegemony resistance. The Emperor is dead, Vexnoth reported without preamble. Suicide when it became clear that reconquest was impossible. The remaining core worlds are in open rebellion. Military commanders are fighting each other for control of the last Imperial assets. Within 6 months, there will be no organized hegemony resistance anywhere in the galaxy. Admiral Mitchell nodded gravely. The news was expected, but still significant. The death of Imperial authority created both opportunities and dangers for the emerging galactic order. What about the weapons stockpiles? Planetary sterilization devices, stellar bombardment systems? Most have been secured by local populations or cooperative forces. Some may be hidden in deep space installations, but without central coordination, they pose minimal threat. The greater concern is economic collapse. Many worlds don't know how to function without Imperial direction. That was humanity's next challenge, and one they were uniquely equipped to address. Earth's rapid transformation from a single-planet species to galactic liberators had given them extensive experience in adapting quickly to new circumstances and helping other species do the same. The galactic cooperative that emerged over the following year was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of imperial hierarchy, it operated through voluntary associations between species that contributed their unique strengths to collective prosperity. Human innovation was balanced by Andromedan mathematical precision, crystal confederacy, artistic achievement, and the practical wisdom of dozens of other species. Trade routes that had once carried tribute to imperial capitals now facilitated free exchange between equal partners. Research stations that had developed weapons for conquest now focused on medical advances and environmental restoration. Military forces that had enforced imperial will were retrained as peacekeepers and emergency response units. But perhaps the most significant change was philosophical. The galaxy's children no longer grew up believing that strength meant the right to dominate the weak. Instead, they learned that true power came from helping others achieve their full potential, that diversity was strength rather than threat, and that freedom was a right rather than a privilege. Admiral Sarah Mitchell, now serving as Earth's first galactic ambassador, stood once again on the observation deck of New Geneva Station. But instead of watching construction, she was observing the arrival of the first truly free galactic assembly. Representatives from 300 liberated worlds were gathering to establish the permanent institutions of cooperative governance. Regrets? Asked Captain Torres, who had become her closest advisor on interstellar affairs. None, Mitchell replied without hesitation. Every species has the right to determine their own destiny. Every being deserves the opportunity to reach their full potential. Every civilization should be free to choose their own path among the stars. She gestured toward the assembly vessels, each one representing worlds that had thrown off the chains of imperial domination. This is what we fought for. Not just Earth's freedom, but the principle that freedom itself is non-negotiable. The galaxy had learned many lessons from humanity's arrival on the interstellar stage. They had discovered that technological superiority was no guarantee of military victory, that imperial power was more fragile than it appeared, and that the desire for freedom was universal among intelligent species. That the most important lesson was one that would reshape galactic civilization for millennia to come. When you tell the universe that some things are worth fighting for and some principles are worth dying for, the universe has a tendency to listen. And when humanity decides that freedom matters more than peace, that justice matters more than order, and that dignity matters more than survival, they don't just change their own world, they change the cosmos itself. The galaxy had tried to enslave humans. In response, Earth hadn't just won a war, they had liberated existence itself from the tyranny of those who believed that might made right, and in the process, they had taught the stars to sing songs of freedom that would echo until the end of time.